This is the 10-Minute Contrarian Podcast. This is VP. We are a solutions-based podcast diving into the world of contrarian investing and alternative finance. You can find us hosted on the No Nonsense Forex YouTube channel, NoNonsenseForex.com, and podcast players everywhere. Episode 186 is brought to us by Bybit. I say it all the time. Every time we have a huge move up or a huge move down, traders absolutely rake. It's almost impossible not to. I mean, you could miss the move altogether, which does happen sometimes, but normally, as trend traders, we're on it, and it just keeps happening to my Bybit traders. Why not you? Go down to the show notes, click the link that takes you to the Bybit blog, update you on everything you need to know. If you're interested, go to the bottom of that blog, click my affiliate link, and get signed up. Not only do you get to catch all these moves, you get all the great stuff Bybit gives you, promotions, airdrops, contests, tons of trading pairs, because as everybody knows by now, with Bybit membership has its rewards. It is the 10-Minute Contrarian Podcast, and we are in the January prediction series, and today is gold and silver's turn. And in fact, I could remind everybody, I didn't do this last time when we did the macro episode. This podcast does go to YouTube. I know most of you are listening on podcast players everywhere, but if you want to go to YouTube at any point in time and put your own predictions down in the comments section, I would love for you guys to do that for gold and silver. And if you didn't do that for macro, go back and listen to that episode again, or if you remember what I said, go down and put your own predictions in the comments section. The only thing I ask is that you tell me why, and then we can all go look back at the end of 2024 and see how we did. Again, these predictions aren't meant to be taken too seriously. They are just sit there for me to look back on and brag if I win and backtrack if I lose. You know how it goes by now. But it is gold and silver's time, like I said. But with macro, I said, and with a lot of what we're going to talk about this month, so much of it comes down to what this administration in the United States does. If they're able to do it, the saboteuring and chaos that's going to come along the way, and what their actual timetable is. You know, we don't know. Are they going to let the market fall like they should? And we finally have an administration in place that seems like they would be willing to do that. Now, the big question is, when do you allow it to happen? You know, I would say with rates continuing to drop, you would want to do this sooner than later so you can do what they do with every recession and get ahead of the game by dropping rates now. Makes sense, right? But how will this affect gold and silver? And another question we have to ask ourselves, too, is one of the biggest reasons for the rise in gold and silver in the past few years has been central banks buying it, particularly gold. Now, will we see this continue? Will we see an increase or a decrease? Will these central banks ever be compelled to sell this gold? From where I sit, these are not questions I can answer myself. So I will just take what I know and what I feel a bit more confident forecasting and use this information for my 2025 predictions, at least when it comes to gold and silver. And again, I am not super confident about any of these 2025 predictions. Even in the thing I am most confident about, I am just the most confident about that thing compared to the other things I'm trying to predict. Overall, I have so little confidence compared to what I had last year. So remember that too as we go forward. However, I am going to go ahead and put the prediction out there now that I think the price of gold and silver from today, January 11th, 2025, till the end of December 2025, the prices of spot gold and spot silver will both be higher than they are right now. In the past, I always used the first trading day of the month as the starting point. I don't think that was very wise. I think it makes a lot more sense to do it from when I broadcast the episode, because then I don't cheat and get a head start one way or the other. So that's what we're going to do from January 11th to December 31st. I think both prices will be higher, and here's why I say this. Now, let's revisit how investor behavior during recessions typically goes down. We've said this before on the show many times, but it's time to revisit it. Now, what you will typically see is a panic into cash. And by cash, I mean especially the United States dollar. Literally everything else sells off. Stocks, gold, crypto, commodities, all of it, even oil at first. But then, soon after that, you typically see people migrate into gold. I'm not sure why this is. I'm not sure why people don't panic into gold. They panic into cash. I guess it's because they're just selling everything. And when you sell stuff, you get cash back. But then somewhere along the line, people figure out, okay, I might need to protect myself. And so that's when gold typically gets a bid. This has been the case during almost every recession we've seen in the past 40 years. Now, as far as the timetable goes here, we really don't know. Like, how quickly do people migrate into gold? Hard to say. In recent memory, we had two, quote, recessions that behaved a bit differently. Back in 2008, gold pretty much did nothing but go down all year before people started buying it in 2009, and it went up ever since. Back in 2020, when we had that mini drop, it was so fast and so panicky. Really, March was that really, really bad month for almost everything. But if you go back and look at a monthly chart, because like we say, monthly chart is the great cheat code here at the podcast. It formed kind of a doji. It went down, but it kind of went right back up. And then gold, the price of gold just kept going higher and higher since that month. So that happened really quickly. Now, what's the big difference between 2008 and 2020 in terms of investor behavior? We can all talk to each other now. People are a lot less in the dark about what's going on. Therefore, they tend to react more quickly. So for recessionary purposes, if we do see one in 2025, it all kind of depends on when it is. If it's in the beginning or middle of the year, there could be a chance that people start migrating to gold a lot quicker than they did in the past. Now, the big question you would have to ask yourself there from a prediction standpoint is, how far does it drop and how long does it take to recover that drop? In 2020, it took almost no time at all. So from that standpoint, I would be bullish. However, I kept saying in the macro episode, it all centers around what the United States does. I think with gold and silver, the United States matters a lot less. I think this is the one great exception. And gold and silver investors, we all kind of know this, right? It really matters what happens in the rest of the world, in particular places like China and India, and to a lesser degree Europe and places like Turkey, who buys a lot of gold. I'm more concerned with what they're doing. And if you look around the world, most of the rest of the world is already in a recession. And I think they are going to stay there for a while. So I think in the rest of the world, which is the place that really matters here, you're going to see a lot of continued buying, even at these higher prices. I think if Europe does not realize they're screwed by now, they're about to realize it. And so you're going to see more buying there. And never sleep on Europe. People nowadays think Europe is irrelevant. No, Europe has a lot of people, and those people have money. So the main thesis behind my prediction for 2025 gold and silver prices are not really what happens in the United States, but what is already happening in the rest of the world. I think that alone will be enough to make gold and silver prices go higher in the year 2025. Now, I have some extra thoughts here and some pretty hot news coming out of the silver market. I think things are going to get really exciting for silver pretty soon here. Now, we've been saying this for a long time, but all the same, despite Wall Street's best efforts to tamp down the price, silver just keeps climbing. Now, before I get to some of this data, I get asked a lot if I follow the gold and silver ratio and if I make any decisions based on that. My thoughts there are I've never really used it. You certainly can, and I think you should when prices get to particular extremes. If you look back at 2020, the gold and silver ratio got way out of control to the gold side, and that was the prime time to stack up on silver. If you remember, Mike Maloney did it, and he's like, look, I know sentiment's in the toilet for silver, but this is a slam dunk. You buy silver every single time you see this. He did. The price of silver went up a lot, and he looked like a genius for doing something that is typically very obvious. Now, if you go look at the silver gold ratio now, and again, zoom out to the monthly chart, you'll see we've been stuck in a pretty tight range ever since the beginning of 2022. So there's really nothing to read there. I actually tried trading the gold silver ratio, 10 years ago. Didn't have a whole lot of success with it. So apart from extreme examples, which you should be on the lookout for, I don't really use the gold silver ratio myself. So now that I've gotten that out of the way, let's talk about the story for silver in 2025. This morning, I retweeted a tweet from Steve St. Angelo of the SRS Rocco Report, and he showed a chart, and I've been following this for a long time, as have a lot of you, but he says that based on the chart he showed, silver inventories are at an all-time low at the LBMA. Now, if you look at that chart, it doesn't really line up with what he said. We've actually seen lower inventories at the start of 2024. But either way, they're still really, really low. But this has been a story for a while now. This is nothing new. But what might be new information to you, because it was new information to me. Now, if you're listening to this podcast in real time on the Saturday I release it, or probably the following week, you'll be able to see this. If you're listening to this in the future, then maybe not. But if you go and follow Steve St. Angelo and you look at his pinned tweet, the data he shares there is super interesting. He shows silver industrial demand as a percentage of world silver mine supply. 10 years ago, 2014, 2015, it was at 51%. It currently stands, for 2024's numbers, at 86%. That is an extraordinary increase and a very, very telling stat as to where silver industrial usage is at today. And it's no surprise, given all the green technology and the electrification that is being attempted to happen worldwide, not just with solar panels, but with EV cars, which are all the rage now in China and the rest of Asia. We spoke about this back in the lithium episode. So not only do you have supply falling, as it has been for years now, you also have demand rising, not just a little bit, but a lot. But let's go back to the supply side and see just how much it is actually falling. Pop quiz, and everybody should know this. Who is the number one leading silver producer in the world? Which country? It's Mexico. And in Mexico, silver production has fallen quite a bit in the past year. It was very steady for a long time, but now it's dropping. On top of that, new President Claudia Sheinbaum is one of those people. She ran a big part of her platform on the need for climate change measures, not the need for climate change, but the need for us to do something about climate change. And she has threatened to ban all open pit mining in Mexico, which is a large portion of silver miners. Now, I don't see how this could actually happen. The PR backlash would be extraordinary because you have entire cities and towns in Mexico that are reliant on these mines. And that's a pretty big voter base to destroy. But it's been said, and they appear to be serious. And if this happens, the overall silver production in the largest silver producing country in the world would absolutely tank. And bringing these mines back online someday, it doesn't happen overnight. So there's really not a whole lot of good news on the horizon in terms of silver supply. And we've already seen by the numbers, demand's going up. But we have to be careful out there, contrarians. I've always said I think the cheapest silver out there is in the ground, even though I wish I owned more physical. And I know a lot of you are silver mining stock investors out there as well. And a lot of you have exposure to Mexico. Know what you own. If you have an ETF, know what the ETF owns. These open pit mining operations in Mexico are going to continue to be tenuous going forward. It's high risk, high reward there, to where I think there are probably better plays elsewhere to where you still get that really nice upside without having all that crazy risk. But regardless of what we see happening in price this year in silver, it's hard not to be super bullish going forward. I remember getting asked the question a couple years ago, saying, what are your most bullish assets 2 years down the road, 5 years down the road, and 10 years down the road? And 2 years down the road, I said Bitcoin. So far, so good there. 5 years down the road, I said silver. And 10 years down the road, I said copper. And I think that silver narrative is really, really playing out here. Not an official prediction that it will outperform gold, but just a side prediction. And I just wanted to add that news into this episode because I feel like it's appropriate. And regardless of what happens in 2025, it's hard not to be really bullish. I'm not dumping any of my positions for any reason. And if I'm given a chance to add more, I will. So it's one of those heads we win, tails we win more type situations. Either the price of silver is going to go up in 2025, or it's going to drop and it's going to give us a nice little dip, maybe the last real dip we're going to get before takeoff. So given what you know about this industry and given what I just told you, what are your predictions? Again, go to YouTube and go to this podcast episode and tell us what you think down below. The price of precious metals has treated us very, very well long term. Ever since this podcast has been in existence, it has been very, very good to us and should continue to be. And even when the whole world was transfixed on things like tech and crypto, we certainly don't hate tech and crypto, but we still understood, even though it was hated for a while, that gold and silver was a really, really great place to be. And we ignored the naysayers because we were not crazy. We were just early.